We were all sitting around that crowded table at the office lunch. The usual suspects: Mark from accounting with his receding hairline and inflated ego, Susan from HR pretending to care about workplace harmony while secretly keeping score of every office drama, and my boss, Richard, who thought his corner office gave him the right to treat people like disposable commodities. I was quietly eating my sandwich when Mark looked directly at me, that smug grin spreading across his face like oil on water. "She can't even drive," he said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. The comment came out of nowhere. We'd been talking about the new parking policy, nothing more. But Mark had this talent for turning any conversation into an opportunity to diminish someone, especially me. Everyone laughed, including my boss. Richard actually slapped the table, his wedding ring making that hollow sound against the cheap laminate. "That's rich, Mark. Absolutely rich." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, feeling that familiar burn in my chest. Not anger. I'd learned to bury that years ago. It was something else. Disappointment, maybe. Or just exhaustion from being the office punching bag for so long. You see, I'd been working at Henderson and Associates for 8 years. 8 years of being overlooked for promotions. 8 years of having my ideas stolen and presented by men who spoke louder in meetings. 8 years of being treated like I was lucky just to have a job at all. They called me the secretary, even though I was a senior analyst. They asked me to take notes in meetings where I was supposed to be presenting. And when I tried to speak up, I was too emotional or not a team player. Mark had made it his personal mission to remind me of my place. He'd started small, comments about my clothes, my lunch choices, the way I organized my desk. But lately, it had escalated. He'd joke about how I probably couldn't handle certain accounts because they required driving to client meetings. He'd make exaggerated gestures about parallel parking whenever I walked by. The driving thing had become his favorite weapon because, honestly, I rarely drove to work. I lived close enough to walk, and in a city like ours, it made sense. But Mark didn't know the real reason I didn't drive to work. None of them did. As the laughter died down and they moved on to discussing weekend golf plans that I'd never be invited to join, I excused myself from the table. "I need some fresh air," I said quietly. Richard barely acknowledged me, already deep in conversation with Mark about some client Mark had supposedly saved last quarter, a client whose proposal I'd written from scratch. I walked outside, pulled out my phone, and made a call I'd been putting off for months. "Hey, Dad, it's me. I think it's time." My father's voice was warm, concerned. "Are you sure, sweetheart? Once you do this, there's no going back to your quiet life." I looked back through the office windows at my coworkers, still huddled around that table, probably already moving on to their next target now that I was gone. I'm sure. Here's what they didn't know about me. What nobody at Henderson and Associates knew about me. My name is Sarah Wellington. Not Sarah Wellington Smith like it says on my ID badge, but Sarah Wellington of the Wellington family. My grandfather founded Wellington Industries in 1952. My father currently sits as chairman of the board of a company worth $2.3 billion. We own manufacturing plants in 12 countries, employ over 50,000 people, and hold patents on technology that every major automotive company in the world licenses from us. I had been living deliberately small, deliberately invisible, working at Henderson and Associates under a modified name because I wanted to prove something to myself. I wanted to know if I could make it on my own merit, without the family name opening doors or creating expectations. I wanted to earn respect through my work, not my bank account. It had been a noble experiment, and a complete failure. For 8 years, I'd watched mediocre men get promoted over me. I'd smiled politely while they took credit for my innovations. I'd endured their jokes about women drivers and their casual comments about how I'd probably quit once I found a husband and started having babies. I told myself it was character building, that I was learning what the real world was like for people who didn't have trust funds and family connections. But sitting in that parking lot, I realized I wasn't building character. I was enabling them. Every day I stayed quiet. Every slight I absorbed without response, I was teaching them that treating people like me was acceptable. I wasn't being noble. I was being complicit. The call I made was to my family's lawyer. By 4 p.m. that same day, the paperwork was complete. Wellington Industries, now owned 67% of Henderson and Associates. It had taken exactly 2 hours and $47 million. I didn't go back upstairs after lunch. Instead, I drove home to the garage I kept across town, the one none of my coworkers knew about. The one that housed my Ferrari 488 GTB, my Porsche 911 Turbo S, and the vintage Aston Martin that had been my 21st birthday gift. I chose the Ferrari, Rosso Corsa Red, because subtlety was no longer the goal. I drove back to the office at exactly 5 p.m., when I knew everyone would be heading to the parking garage. I pulled into the spot right next to Mark's beaten-up Honda Civic, the engine's distinctive V8 growl echoing off the concrete walls like thunder. I stepped out slowly, adjusting my jacket, and locked the car with a chirp that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden silence. Mark stood frozen halfway to his car, his mouth actually hanging open. Richard was there too, along with Susan and half the office, all staring like I'd just materialized from another dimension. "Nice car," Mark finally managed, his voice cracking like he was 14 again. "Thanks," I said simply. "She drives beautifully." That's when Richard stepped forward, still trying to process what he was seeing. "Sarah, how did you—" "I mean, that's a Ferrari." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had in that office in 8 years. "Yes, it is. Richard, I'll need to see you in your office first thing tomorrow morning. There are going to be some changes around here." "Changes?" Mark laughed, but it sounded hollow now, uncertain. "What kind of changes? You can't just—" "Oh, but I can, Mark." I pulled out my phone and showed him the email that had been sent to all company leadership 20 minutes earlier. "Wellington Industries now owns controlling interest in Henderson and Associates. I'm your new majority shareholder. And tomorrow I become your new CEO." The parking garage went dead silent except for the gentle ticking of the Ferrari's engine cooling down. Richard's face went through about 6 different colors. "Wellington, but your name is—" "Wellington Smith on my employee ID, yes. I wanted to see how far merit would take me here. Turns out, not very far at all." I looked directly at Mark, who had gone pale as paper. Especially when people are more interested in making jokes about women drivers than recognizing talent. Susan, ever the HR professional, tried to salvage something from the wreckage. "Sarah, I think there may have been some misunderstandings. If you'd ever brought your concerns to me—" "I did, Susan. 14 times over 8 years. I have the email trail. Each time you told me to try to fit in better and not take things so personally." I clicked my key fob, and the Ferrari's lights flashed once. "But don't worry. That's all going to be addressed in tomorrow's staff meeting." Mark had found his voice again, and with it his anger. "This is insane. You can't just— You've been lying to all of us for 8 years. This is fraud or something." I looked at him with the kind of calm that comes from finally being able to stop pretending. "Mark, I've never lied about anything. I earned my degree from MIT. I earned my MBA from Wharton. I've increased this company's efficiency by 34% since I've been here, saved Henderson and Associates roughly $12 million in wasteful spending, and brought in 8 major clients that you all assumed just found us somehow." I paused, letting that sink in. The only thing I hid was my last name. Everything else, my qualifications, my work, my ideas that you presented as your own, all of that was real. More real than anything you've contributed to this company. The crowd around us had grown. Junior analysts, assistants, even the security guard was watching from the elevator. But I only had eyes for Mark, who looked like he was going to be sick. "You want to know the truth, Mark? I could have bought this entire company 8 years ago with my quarterly dividend check. But I wanted to prove I belonged here on my own merit. I wanted to earn respect the hard way." I shook my head, genuinely sad now. I should have known better. Respect isn't something you can earn from people who've already decided you don't deserve it. Richard was still trying to process everything. "Sarah, Miss Wellington, I think we need to discuss this. Perhaps we can work something out. If there have been communication issues, if people felt unheard." "Oh, Richard." I almost felt sorry for him. "Almost. There's nothing to work out. The acquisition is complete. The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. I suggest you prepare your resignation letter tonight because I'll be asking for it first thing in the morning." I walked around to the driver's side of the Ferrari, the sound of my heels on concrete echoing like a countdown. Just as I was about to get in, I turned back to face them one more time. For what it's worth, Mark, you were right about one thing. I really couldn't drive to work every day. Do you want to know why? He stared at me, speechless, because I was afraid that if people knew who I really was, they'd never see me as anything more than a rich girl playing office. I thought if I could just work hard enough, be quiet enough, humble enough, eventually talent would win out over prejudice. I opened the car door, and the interior leather gleamed in the fluorescent garage lighting. But you taught me something valuable today, Mark. You taught me that some people will never see you as anything more than what they've already decided you are. So why not give them something worth looking at? I slid into the driver's seat, the engine purring to life with a sound that seemed to fill every corner of that concrete tomb. Through the windshield, I could see Mark still standing there, his face a mixture of shock and rage and something that might have been fear. As I backed out of the parking space, I rolled down the window one last time. Oh, and Mark? Clean out your desk tonight. Security will escort you out tomorrow after the meeting. I drove out of that parking garage and into the evening light, leaving behind 8 years of being invisible, 8 years of being underestimated, 8 years of letting other people define my worth. The next morning, I walked into that office wearing a tailored suit that cost more than Mark's monthly salary, carrying a briefcase full of termination letters and new policies. The same people who had laughed at me over lunch were now standing when I entered the room, calling me Miss Wellington and ma'am. It was everything I thought I wanted. Complete vindication. Total victory. The ultimate reversal of fortune. But here's the thing about revenge. It's never quite as satisfying as you imagine it will be. Standing in that boardroom, watching grown adults scramble to save their jobs, apologizing for things they'd done 1,000 times before without consequence, I realized something important. I hadn't just been hiding my wealth from them. I'd been hiding from myself, hiding from the responsibility that comes with power, hiding from the obligation to use that power to make things better, not just for me, but for everyone who comes after me. So yes, I fired Mark, and Richard, and Susan, who had enabled 8 years of harassment complaints getting buried in bureaucracy. But I also promoted 7 women who had been stuck in support roles despite having the qualifications for leadership positions. I instituted new policies about workplace conduct and equality. I brought in an outside firm to conduct sensitivity training. I turned Henderson and Associates into the kind of place I had hoped it would be 8 years ago when I first walked through those doors with my college degree and my carefully modified name tag. And the Ferrari. I still drive it to work every day. Not because I'm trying to prove anything anymore, but because it reminds me of something important. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop hiding who you really are. Sometimes the quiet revolution is the one that changes everything. If you enjoyed the story of workplace vindication, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more incredible tales of justice served cold. Have you ever had a moment where you revealed something that completely changed how people saw you? Share your story in the comments below.